That covers some of the stuff that I had wanted to talk about talking directly to your children, because you said it's important not to talk about your stuff. So
Hmm.
if if you have a child who's very young, always speak in age appropriate terms. Do not speak in baby talk to these children, but
I shouldn't be
definitely
doing that anyway.
don't. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And don't tell them what's going on with the other parent, or, oh yeah, we're going to court next week, so I'll
Yeah.
be able to solve that problem. Little kids can't handle that.
Mm-mm. They just need to play.
Yeah,
That's their job, is to play and grow and
yeah,
not be involved in any of this.
yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's better to pull back, right? I know we've talked about that. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
better to say, you know what, if there's this constant push and pull, push and pull, push and pull, sometimes it's better for one parent to step out and say, I just don't want you to be in pain. You want to talk about that?
Sure, absolutely.
You
That's
have a
been a
great story.
huge, yeah, that's a huge healing thing for me. This year, in fact, it was in January. I had a talk with a friend of mine, and we were talking about the subject, and I was telling her about what happened with my daughter when she was 13. And what happened, okay, basically what happened was, during my process with all this while I was going through it, I told my ex-husband and his wife everything I was doing, every move I was making, all this stuff, because I thought that they would work with me, which obviously wasn't the case. So in that year, I had taken them to court to get my visitation, not set. It was already set. I needed to get it validated so they would follow through with it, which they did not up until that point. And so the courts brought my daughter in there, and she, said her piece, and I talked, and I'm in the courtroom. I'm heartbroken. I couldn't deal with it. And as the days went on, as the visits happened, every time I came to pick her up, she would get in the back seat and she'd be texting them so she would feel connected with them. I got it. And we barely had conversation. I couldn't get anything out of her. I just asked her about her, and it was like, I didn't tell her about me in any aspect at that point. And I
Not
couldn't get
crossing any
anything.
boundaries, which is good.
Right, right. And it was not easy, because being a parent, you want your child to know who you are so they feel safe with you, so it's this really difficult line to straddle, when you're going through this. So anyway, after a couple of months of torture, basically, probably more, well, for both of us, but probably more for her, because after spending time with me thinking I'm some kind of monster or whatever, the impression she had was, I take her back and I don't know what they're doing back there. They could be interrogating her. They could be doing and I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. So one day I just decided I was going to write her a letter, and I set it up for the next visitation. I took her to a park. I handed her the letter, and I gave her the option never to not see me anymore, because I just could not torture her like that anymore. I didn't want her to. I saw the look on her face, and that was torturing me more than, my need at the time to be with her. And it became more important and more powerful than that. And so she did what I anticipated. She took my option of not seeing me again. And what the weirdest thing was, actually, I did it in nature. So, for me, nature is a calming, environment.
And how old was she?
She was 13.
Okay.
And so, oddly enough, it felt like this huge thing was lifted off of my shoulders. And she actually started talking to me. We were walking next to each other, walking back to the car, talking. And she got in the car, and I drove her home 3 hours early.
It took a weight off her shoulders,
It
actually.
did, yes. And as I watched that, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Then it took that weight off of my shoulders, and I dropped her off. Didn't say a word to her father. Didn't give him any inclination of what I was doing. I sat there for a second, watched her close the door, which was the most heartbreaking, nauseating thing that I could even. I don't even know how to express it in any type of term, but I drove away about a block away, and I sat down there, and I did the biggest, loudest cry, um, I just
Guttural, really.
guttural. Yeah,
Yeah.
I forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just this primal screaming, crying, just getting it out of my system. And then when I was done with it, I was like, okay, I can handle this. And then about a year, and then I went home and just, day by day, little by little, just worked through it in my own terms. And it was not the easiest thing in the world to do. And I started to feel guilty about that. And then about a year later, I received an email from her stepmother saying that my daughter wanted to be adopted by her. So I had to go through this whole process all over again. And it took me about 3 months to make the decision, but I made the decision to let my daughter go so she could be happy. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, if I'm not in the picture, they can't blame me for anything anymore. So if anything goes wrong, she's going to see that, because children follow what adults do, not what they say.
Correct.
And I somehow I knew that, but it didn't make it any easier making that decision. So long story short, she ended up getting adopted, and I got another email from her stepmother saying, oh, do you want me to send you the adoption paperwork? And I'm like, no, I don't think I need it. She's still my daughter. It's okay. I'll pass.
Yeah.
So coming up to January, I had this conversation, and I told this story to a friend of mine, and she's like, oh, well, have you ever heard the story of King Solomon? And I was like, vaguely, I don't know. I don't remember. Please just, fill me in, tell me about it. And so basically, short story, what happens with King Solomon is that God asks him what he wants from him in order to be a good king and lead his people well, basically. And King Solomon says, I would like wisdom. So that's what God gave him. Or for those of you who refer to higher power or any of that, this is just a story from the Bible. But so one day these two women came, and they both had given birth to a baby boy at the same time, or a baby at the same time. And one of the babies died. So one of the women came in carrying the dead baby, and the other woman came in carrying the live baby. And King Solomon asked them, well, what do you want me to do here? What's going on? Well, and they both said, well, this live baby is my baby. I want my baby. And so he thought about it and decided, okay, well, we're going to cut the baby in half. And he called over one of his people with this big long sword to cut the baby. And the one woman said, yeah, go ahead and cut the baby in half. It doesn't matter anyway. And then the other woman said, no, don't cut the baby. I'll give it to the other woman instead so I can save my child. And it turned out that the woman who gave the child up was what they call in the Bible a true mother.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard her tell me that story, I started tearing. She's like bawling. I'm tearing up. I'm like, oh my God. And that was like this huge awakening for me that it was okay what I did. I didn't do anything. I didn't hurt her by doing this. I feel like I gave her the life that she wanted. And as tear-jerking, as heartbreaking as that whole thing is, if my daughter is happy, then I'm happy.
Right.
And there's nothing else I can do with that.
So what advice would you give to other parents who are alienated from their children?
Really the biggest thing that I can tell you from my own experience is basically I did a lot of personal development for me, not just with my son, but for me. And by the time I got to the point where I could get together with him and we did it together, it just made it exponentially grow in healing and growth between us. So definitely take a look at yourself and see where you can find things that are
meaningful,
attracting these
healing,
the healing work, and just dig deep. I mean, one of the things that I say, my mantra is be willing, be courageous, be free. And I've been following that mantra for many years, or for about 3 or 4 years. Yeah. And, I mean, it's just something that's so powerful. Right. It all starts within ourselves. and whatever we have that we heal in ourselves really energetically and physically expands out into the universe and to our children, especially as moms. We're connected with our children, but I will not say that, I'm not going to say that dads are not a connection, or other parents, other step parents or anybody, grandparents or whatever, but it all goes out to the world when we heal. And the other thing, 100% self-care, self-love, learning about self-love, figuring out who you are, figuring out how you can move forward in your own life. Because when my belief system is, I was put in this journey in my life so I could find out who I am and what I'm capable of. And it all stems back to, people who go through certain things. When they go through them, now they know what it feels like to be able to guide and help other people. And that's what I want to be able to do, because I get it. I understand. I know where you're coming from. I know what it feels like. Yeah. A tangible thing that I would highly recommend is, especially in the state of Florida, which I believe it is mandatory unless there's absolutely no cooperation with the other parent, is mediation. Mm-hmm. Mediation is huge. I wanted to do that with my own children, but my ex-husband and his wife would never allow it. And if you can, the other thing that I would highly recommend is, before anything gets huge worse than it could, when you start seeing it, or before anything happens, you make sure you and your spouse sit down with your children and tell them it is not their fault. Yeah. They didn't do anything wrong. It has nothing to do, what's happening with mommy and daddy has nothing to do with them, and give them that sense of feeling that they don't have the responsibility to take care of that other parent. That's huge. I never got to do that. And my kids thought I abandoned them because of that. And that's one of the things that broke my heart and stuck with me for a long time, and is the driving force behind what I'm doing with parental alienation now. Wow. Thank you. That's excellent. It's excellent advice. In this video, we learned about taking care of yourself throughout the process, taking care of your children by sending energetic love, because they'll feel it. Grandparents can do it. Uncles and aunts can do it. Everybody can do it, where you just send healing energy out there. Mm-hmm. It's the best you could do. We also learned that 2 seconds of eye contact can help to create better relationship. Mm-hmm. And also silence can help create better relationships, and more. We learned a lot during this interview. I want to thank you so much, Caroline, for making the time for this. And I'm sure you and I will have many, many dialogues together about this topic and others. Yes, ma'am. So I'm signing off for now. Coach Red, you can reach me at www.coachred1.com. You can also find me on Facebook at Communication and Parenting with Coach Red. Please like and share my content. You can also find me on LinkedIn on Rochelle Strauss. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye, Caroline. Bye.